Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are and whatever you are doing. This is Dr. Luther Smith, and you are watching Basic Bible Study Tools. If this is your first time watching this show, I would advise you going back to video 1 and checking out what we've done at this point, because in this episode, we're actually going to deal with Bible explanation. We are moving away from observation, and we are entering into explanation of the passage. All right, so if this is your first video that you've seen, I would strongly encourage you to go back and look at all of the exercises that have been done up to this point. Because now we are getting into explaining the scriptures. So as you can see, if you've been following this series up to this point, you realize that there's a lot that goes into explaining the scriptures. You can't just explain it. I mean, you can explain it outright, but if you do, you risk falling into these gaps, right, that are missing here. And these gaps here are basically what you've been addressing for 6 weeks. These are the gaps that you've been addressing. So you've been addressing the chronological gap because we're separated from that time period, right? And so you've been filling the gaps with that. The geographical gap, because really we do not live in Israel. At least maybe you live in Israel if you're watching this, but those of us who live in America, we do not live there, and so the geography may elude us. The cultural gap, there's a cultural aspect of this, right? These letters and these historical narratives, these prophecies and stuff, they are written by Jews. So we need to understand their culture. We need to understand where they're coming from if we are to interpret or explain scripture properly. Linguistics, we need to understand the language and the wording. We need to understand the structure and the grammar. We need to understand that and how that fits into chronology, geography, and culture. We need to understand all of that, right? And again, like I said, you've been addressing these up to this point. Literacy. What genre is it? Is it history? Is it prophecy? Is it just an epistle, a letter? That isn't the main thing that we use to explain scripture, but it is something that we might want to take note of because we approach genres differently when we know what it is. And then lastly is the supernatural. We're divorced from the external workings of God. In other words, he's not parting Red Seas these days. He's not having manna fall from the sky these days, and so we need to understand that from there are things that are working within the scriptures that we have not seen, right? That we have not observed with our own physical eyes in this time. Okay, so essentially, all of these you have addressed from week 1 to week 6 when you were asking questions about who is Paul, why is he writing this, and things like that. You were addressing these gaps here. You're addressing these gaps here. Okay. Now, you have been somewhat of a Sherlock Holmes, right? You've kind of been like a Sherlock Holmes in this endeavor, right? You've been doing some detective work in trying to dig and excavate what the chronology of the text is, trying to give a ballpark figure of when it was written. That tells you something about the text, where Paul was at the time that he was writing this, who is Paul, things like that, right? You have went through great pains, hopefully, to draw out these gaps. Okay, so when you explain the text, you are explaining it, filling in as many of these gaps as you possibly can. Okay? So now you have a full understanding of the text that you're going to explain. Now, when it comes to Bible explanation, Okay, when it comes to you explaining the details of what's in the text, you are now going to switch from being a detective to being a reporter. Okay, you are going to be a reporter. You're going to be like Agent, what is it, Agent Friday from Dragnet. You're just going to give me the facts. Okay, you're going to be a reporter. Okay, you're not going to give me fake news. You're going to give me what the facts are. Okay, all of the stuff that you studied, that you researched, you're going to report it to whoever is your audience or whoever you're explaining this to. Okay, and a reporter, again, is all about the facts, the data, what they researched and reviewed and they explain. Okay, so using this kind of this image of a reporter, you are taking off your detective hat and now you're putting on your reporter hat. Okay, there are 5 things that you have to consider, and again, these 5 are basically, we learned these in school. When you want to write an essay or a research paper, right, there are 5 things you need to consider when you write them, okay, or when you tell a story or something like that. Who wrote this, right? Who wrote this? You're talking to your friend. You're saying, "Hey, I read the book of Ephesians, chapter 1, verses 1 to 10," and they're like, "Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. I don't know about Ephesians. Who wrote it?" Right? Now you're going to tell us who, right? You're going to explain it was a man named Paul, who was an apostle, who was sent by Christ. He got knocked off his donkey on the road, or he got knocked off his horse on the road to Emmaus. He was blinded, so on and so forth. He was a persecutor of the church before that. You're going to give me who, right? You're going to give me the details of who Paul is. What? So what's going on in the text? What's going on around Paul when he's writing this? What's going on with the saints of Ephesus that causes him to write this? Okay, you're going to tell what is going on, right? When did he write this? Right? So you're not just telling me who, you're telling me what, you're telling me when he wrote this. Now, you can give a ballpark figure. You're going to have to do some extra digging for this, but there are some internal things you could look at that will help you kind of give you a ballpark date as to when it was written. So I'll have you play with that one a little bit. But when did he write this? Right? It's important. Where did he write this? And why did he write this? The why you're going to answer when you look at the text, chapter 1, verses 1 to 10. You're going to know why he did that. Okay? So when you explain text, you're going to give me the facts about the text. What you studied, what you observed, what you researched, the language that you saw. All of this stuff is key to helping you explain the scriptures well. Explain the text well. Okay, who, what, when, where, why. You should always go back to those. Okay, once you find out who it is, you can put that aside. But who's the audience? Do you bring it back in? What took place when he wrote this? When did he write this? Where did he write this? And why did he write this? And what is the point of this? Right? What is the point of chapter 1, verses 1 to 10? What's the point? What is he trying to get at? Which brings me to another point. Okay, one final thing. This is very, very important. Matter of fact, I kind of want you to lean in a little closer to the screen if you can. Okay? Because this is a very, very big nugget of a point here. And I want to get this out, and I want you to get this. If you don't remember anything about this video, you can go back and rewind it. But if you don't, and you don't feel like watching it a second time, just rewind it to this point. Okay? Remember this. Okay? This is important. When it comes to explaining the text, you always want to explain it from the view of the writer. You are not the one who explains it from your point of view. You're explaining it from the point of view of the writer, not you or the person you're explaining it to. Oftentimes we get in a lot of trouble when we try to explain the passage of Scripture from our view, from the view of the reader. That's wrong. That's backwards. I didn't write this, and you didn't either. So we have to explain it from the point of the writer. Okay, the writer is Paul, so we have to try to understand him. And we can understand him by understanding what he wrote and his life surrounding what he wrote and what he's done. And we can only find that from the Scriptures. Okay, so you filled in those gaps, the chronological, the geographical, the linguistic, the literary, the cultural, the supernatural. You saw all those gaps and you filled those in with the activities that we've done, okay, up to this point. Now when you get to explaining the text, go back to who, what, when, where, and why, right? And you will see the point, the major theme of verses 1 to 10. If you've been studying and been looking at repetition of words and looking at reviewing some of the Greek in the words, if you've been doing this, you have a really good firm grasp of Ephesians 1. I can tell you that right now. You've been going through. You've read it about 100 times already. You should have it. You should have it subjected to memory right now. Okay. So you've done that. You've looked at all the words. You've looked at all the Greek words. You kind of you did some cross-referencing. You did all of that to try to get some even greater perspective. You looked at some of the tools, either that I gave you, or you looked at other places. So, but when you explain the text, you always want to explain it from the point of the writer, not the reader. Okay. So your homework for this week, your homework to do for this week, is you need to explain this text using what I just laid out to at least 3 people. At least 3. Okay. 3 people. You don't have to go very deep into it. You can give them the main point. You can even expand on that main point if you like, but you have to explain this text to at least 3 people with the information that you have. You are not to, don't apply anything yet, okay? You are to explain chapter 1, verses 1 to 10 to 3 people that you know. Okay, you can pull them aside and say, hey, I'm kind of learning about the Scriptures. I'd like to explain something to you. Could you just listen for a second and see if they get the main point? Okay, if they don't know what your point is, then you might want to go back if they don't know what the writer's point is, if they don't know what the writer's point is, you might want to go back and take a look at it. Okay, but if they go, oh yeah, I got it, then you know that you've explained it clearly. Do it, practice. It should go well. 3 people. Okay. That will do it for this edition of Basic Bible Study Tools. If you like this show and other shows that we're doing here on Urban Theologian Media, please invest in the channel by subscribing. If you do it, and also click the like button too as well, and you can comment down below as well if you have any tools or techniques or things that you are thinking about. Please comment down below as well, and that'll be it. All right, grace and peace to you guys, and I will catch you on the next episode of Basic Bible Study Tools. Grace and peace to you guys. All right, take care. Bye-bye.